Today, I want to show you a free tool for DaVinci Resolve that's really cool and is going to save you a lot of time. If you've tried to build macros in Fusion, you know that the macro editor is finicky, very limited, and hard to master. Then if you want to do simple stuff like rearrange tools, add drop-down menus, or dividers, you need to have at least some level of knowledge of coding. Matt McCool, really cool guy by the way, saw this problem and decided to try and fix it. So he put together an app called MacroLab, which we're going to look at today as I talk about the best ways to build macros for yourself in DaVinci Resolve. And I have Matt here to tell you a little bit about it. So Matt, what is MacroLab?
Yeah, so MacroLab is a web-based end-to-end macro creation tool. It replaces the native Fusion macro editor and gives you a much more visually interactive way of creating macros. It is entirely web-based, but it doesn't actually do anything online, so your files and everything are not actually being uploaded or downloaded somewhere. So you don't have to worry about privacy, and I don't have to worry about server costs. But it is web-based. That means I can push out updates instantly, and you get them right away. You don't have to make sure that you're on the latest version or anything like that. So
yeah, MacroLab is super cool, and it's something that I've been using a ton myself just to create simple macros to use in my workflow. So let's take a look at the process of importing something to MacroLab and using it to replace the old macro editor. And also Matt's channel is linked down below, so go and subscribe to him. All right, this is the macro that we're going to be using today. It's just a very simple name card animation, so you can see it animates on and then will eventually animate off at the end. But this is the type of macro that'd be perfect to use in MacroLab. It's just a simple name card that you're probably going to use throughout a project, a bunch of different times, and all you need to change is the profile photo, the name, as well as the job title. You don't need to make a full fancy macro out of it. You just need to convert it into something that you don't need to jump to the Fusion page to use every single time. Now, with the built-in way to build macros inside of DaVinci Resolve, you'd have to go through and manually select all the nodes that you want in the order that you want them to show up. So in this case, I might want to do the move all node, then the text, the next text, the color, the mask, all of that stuff. And once I get them selected, I'd have to select all of these tools, right click, come up to macro, and then create macro. And now I have to select each and every control that I want to actually show up. And this menu to select stuff is really annoying. You have to actually go through and click on each one. You can't click one and then shift click the next one to, select the big range. You have to click each individual control. Now we're going to close out of this and not save any changes because instead we're going to use the MacroLab app, which makes this process a lot easier of saving the macro, but then also allows us to customize it in a really easy way. So to bring stuff in, all I need to do is select all of these nodes and then copy them to my clipboard. I don't need to select them in a certain order as we can rearrange all of that stuff later on. Opening up MacroLab, this is actually a new version that's going to be dropping the same day that this video comes out, and all we need to do is click in this box and we can paste in the nodes. We could also just drag a .setting file here or even a .DRFX file, we'll talk about that in a bit, but we can just paste these in and then press the start button. And this is going to load up the MacroLab UI. So off on the left, we have the available controls. This is going to function pretty much the same as the macro editor, that it allows us to select which controls we actually want to see inside of the inspector. Once we select those tools, we can view those in the layout tab, and that's when we can organize them, move them around, add in drop-down labels, separators, we can add images, all sorts of fancy stuff. Once we're done with that, we move over to the export tab, which just has a simple copy button so that way we can preview stuff inside of Fusion, but we could also download it as a .setting file and even save it as a .drfx file. So a lot of cool stuff. Before we get started with actually, adding in different controls, I want to point out the guide all the way up here at the top. This is a great spot to go if you forget how to do something or need to remember what a keyboard shortcut was. And then we also have a drop down for the different updates. You can switch it into light mode if you would like to, and a button to donate to Matt, who's the guy who made this. So looking at the final graphic, there's a few things that I want to point out. So first, we have no other inputs coming into this node. Everything is going to be self-contained. We have one output coming out of the move all node, and my first controls are going to be from this move all node because I want to be able to move the center X and Y of this entire graphic around, as well as to be able to change the size of it. So back on MacroLab, you can see it's taking this letterbox and it's choosing this input. So it'll put an input on the node so that way I could plug something into it. I don't want this in this case because that would actually break the macro. So I'm going to turn that off. And then down at the bottom, you can see move all is selected as the output, which is correct. We want to leave it as that.
Also, something I just added was the ability to right-click an input on the available controls and designate exactly which input that you want the signal to go through. And this works for 3D nodes that have a material or a scene input, so it kind of helps further define exactly which way the information is supposed to flow.
Then to add in that center and size control, all I need to do is press the drop down menu, and then right down here I can grab the center as well as the size control, and that's going to add that right to the middle. To preview what this is going to do, I can come down to the copy code button and then switch back over to DaVinci Resolve. And now if I paste this in here, view this off on the right as well as in the inspector, I have my center X and Y control as well as the size control to move that all around. Back in MacroLab, the cool thing about how he's laid this out is that these look like the actual controls that we see inside of DaVinci Resolve. So I could change the size and set this to be something close to 0.5, and if I copy this and then switch back to DaVinci Resolve, you can see it's going to set the default value for that control to be 0.46. It's just set up as a really intuitive way to change all of these controls, and it makes the process of building a macro really easy. Alright, but the next thing that we might want to add is some of the text controls. So if I come over to the left and then come to text 1, and then under the text page, we can click on the style text, we can click on the font, and we can click on the colors. Now you notice as I select the font as well as the colors, it adds in a few controls with it, because when we add the font, it automatically knows that we want the style control as well. And when we add the red color, it knows that we want the green, blue, and alpha channels. Now instead of clicking all of these individually, what I can also do is click one at the top and then hold down shift and then click on the bottom one. And it's going to just do a range select and pick all of those controls. For the text, we're going to do style text all the way down to character spacing, and I can just click on line spacing to remove it. And then I also want to go to the layout page and grab the layout center. Back in DaVinci Resolve, if I paste this in, you'll see all of these controls appear in the inspector. We have a lot of really cool features to look at still, but first I wanted to ask Matt, why did you decide to build MacroLab in the first place?
I started making MacroLab because I really needed something like this. I spend so much time in Fusion and I'm usually working pretty quickly, and I don't have the time to take a minute and take what I just made and kind of convert it into a reusable template that future me or my coworkers and collaborators can also use. And so I just felt like the Fusion and Resolve community deserved something better. So that's kind of why I made it.
Yeah, and since this is a free tool, if you guys want to help support Matt, he has a link to his Ko-Fi page in the top left of MacroLab. It's also linked down below, and I'd highly encourage you to donate to help support this project. I've also worked out a deal with Matt where WippTemplates is helping to support the project on an ongoing basis. If you don't know what WippTemplates is, it's my website where I sell high-quality DaVinci Resolve tools like the editor collection and editor titles. I use these tools to edit all of my videos extremely fast while still making them look professional and have smooth animations 99% of the time without using any keyframes. Just like MacroLab, the goal of WippTemplates tools is to save you time, and if you want to level up your workflow and make editing easier and more fun in the process, check out WippTemplates, link down below. But for now, let's get back to building that macro. Before we start adding in a ton of controls, I like to start organizing this right away. And one of the really cool things that MacroLab makes super easy is to make drop-down labels. So let's say I want to put all of the text inside of a drop-down label. What I'm going to do is pick the style text and then hold down shift and click layout center so it group selects all of those. Now all I have to do is press this button up in the top right to label the selection. And you see that's going to put it in a drop-down menu that we can open and close, and we can give it a name right here. So I'm just going to do name. Now if I press the copy code button, switch back to DaVinci Resolve and paste this in, you see that we have a drop-down menu, and when I click this, it's going to reveal all of these controls. The nice thing about this is you don't need to know the code to make a drop-down label inside of the .setting file, and you don't need to count how many labels you want to show up in that drop-down menu. In MacroLab, let's look for text 2, and then we're going to grab style text, hold down shift, come down to character spacing, and then again we're going to come down to the layout tab and then grab the layout center. In the center section we can also label controls. So maybe instead of layout center we want to do text offset. And what I'm going to do is also come up to our drop down menu and name the other one text offset as well. Now I'm going to click on style text, come all the way down to text offset. Instead of pressing the button up at the top, I can actually just press L on my keyboard, and that way it compresses all of that into a label. Now what I'm going to do is give this one job title is the name. You see we have the name, we have job title, and then the layout centers are renamed to text offset. Something that I didn't mention is this is also saved as a group macro. So if I double click on this, that means we can open it up and see all of the controls. Inside of this merge to, I have the center X and Y is the ability to just offset the text. And I want to add this into the inspector controls. So I'm going to look for merge to, press the drop down menu, go into the merge, and then grab the center control. In this one, I'm going to name shift text, and I want to move this all the way up to the top. But this will get a little convoluted having a center control, then a size, and then another center control. But I don't want to put this one center control in its own drop down menu. So what I can do instead is add in a separator, like a dividing line. And how I do that is going to add element, coming down to separator, and that's going to add it actually at the bottom of this other drop-down menu. So what I'm going to do is drag this up, put this right above shift text, and then I can close the drop-down menu. And now in DaVinci Resolve, you see that we have those two controls, we have the divider, and then we have the new control that we just added. Next up, I want to add in the controls for the background, like the size of it, as well as its color. So let's look for rectangle 1 right here, and I'm going to grab the width, the height, as well as the corner radius. I don't need the center control because that's just going to be handled by the normal Shift-Alt thing that we added up here. And before I add in the colors, I'm going to do add element and add in a separator. So that way we can have that little clear line in the inspector. Now I'm going to go down to background 1 and then come down to the color tab, and I want all of these colors. And instead of clicking the top one and then shift clicking the bottom one, I can just click this all button that appears when we hover on the top of that page. That'll add in all of those controls. And now I want to come in here, grab the width, grab the subpixel all the way at the bottom, press L, and that'll put it into a drop-down menu. And we can just do this bar controls. And that was really easy to add all of this in, and this still has the gradient control, so we can go in here and make this really fancy. And when you add controls to the inspector, it also adds the on-screen controls, so that way I can come in here, grab it to move this around and adjust those settings without actually using the ones in the inspector. Next, I want to add in some drop shadow controls, and this one has a really cool thing that we can do. Off on the left, I'm going to look for drop shadow 1, and I want to grab the shadow strength, the angle, distance, and blur. And then in the color drop-down, we're going to grab all of those. I also added in this custom control, which is a checkbox to turn the shadow on and off. What we're going to do is drag the shadow up so it's above the shadow strength right at the top. We'll add in an element so we have a separator, and then put this right below the checkbox so we have a shadow checkbox that'll turn it on and off, and then we have all of the customization for the shadow right down here. And now as a neat little trick, I want to make all of these controls disappear when the shadow is turned off, since we don't need those and these won't do anything right now. To do that, I'm going to select all of the controls that I want to hide and put those into a label, and I'm just going to name this hidden label. Now off on the right, this control has a little settings icon, and when I press this, we can convert this to a hidden label. And when we do that, we have an expression. So what I'm going to do is type drop shadow 1 dot shadow. And that's going to reference that checkbox that I created. When I click on the shadow, it's going to hide all of those controls as well as turn off the shadow. And if you want to know how it disables the shadow, if we look at the drop shadow node right here, just under the settings tab, the blend is set to link to that control. So when it's off, it's a value of 0, and when it's on, it's a value of 1. And then once that's set up, we want to click on the hidden label as well as the shadow and put all of that inside of another label, and then call this one shadow controls. Okay, this macro is pretty much done. The last thing we need to do is add in these image controls. And just for fun, what we're going to do is put this on a second page instead of having it in another drop-down menu. Inside of Macro Lab on the left, I'm going to go to the loader node, come down to file, and then grab the file name. So that adds it in. And then I also want to come down to rectangle 2 and grab the corner radius. To add these to another page, we just want to come up to the top, press this add button, and we'll name this one profile, and then press the checkbox. Then back in the controls tab, we'll have these two selected, drag them up, and then just drop them right on profile. That'll add it to the second page, so when I look at this in DaVinci Resolve, it has the new profile page, and we have the file name so we can select where this photo is, as well as the corner radius of that mask. We got a bunch of cool stuff to cover yet, including making .DRFX files right inside of Macro Lab. But before that, I have another question for Matt. Matt, who is Macro Lab designed for?
I think Macro Lab is designed for people who've ever opened up the native macro editor and immediately said nope and closed it. You know, people like me who spend a lot of time in Fusion, but not as much time thinking about how you're going to repurpose this for an edit page workflow. I just think the integration between Fusion and Resolve is so underrated, and there's so many different things that you could be doing that are hyper specific to your exact workflow, and you can develop very niche macros. And I feel like not enough people are taking advantage of that. So this tool is really designed to encourage more people to make their own macros for their own workflows.
Well, yeah, Matt, Macro Lab has been really cool. I've been using it last couple of weeks, and just my workflows creating like little one-off templates that I can use and reuse. For everyone watching, make sure to go support Matt so that way you can keep developing cool tools like this. And yeah, thanks for helping out with this video.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, and a couple more fancy things I want to talk about inside of Macro Lab. The first one is going to be under this add elements, and we can add in a logo image. So when I do this, it's going to ask us to drop an image or click to browse. So I'm going to find the WippTemplates logo and add that in, and we can actually just add this as a header image. So when I do that, I'm gonna copy the code, switch back to DaVinci Resolve, and as you can see, it's gonna add in the WippTemplates logo all the way up at the top. And another cool thing we can do is add in custom buttons. So if I come to add element, come down to custom button, we can give it a name, and we can add in some content down here. So we can either paste in a URL to open up a web page, or we can switch it over to the script mode, and we can do whatever we want here. This is more advanced, so if you don't know what you're doing, don't mess with this. You can break stuff pretty easy. But for right now, we're just gonna leave it on URL. I'm gonna paste in the WippTemplate site, and we'll do visit website is the label. The other really cool thing about this is you can use it to edit on-change controls. So if I were to come to the size control and press the settings, I could set the range and the allowed range, but under advanced, I can set an on-change script. Basically what this does is allows you to run one of those scripts you can put in a button, but run it every time you adjust the control. But finally, now that we have the macro built, I want to talk about exporting this from MacroLab and using it to create a .drfx file. Off on the right, the first thing we need to do is give this a name. So what I'm going to do is call this profile lower third, and then we can choose whether it's a group operator or a macro operator. So right now it's been a group operator, which means I can open it up and see everything inside of it. But if I switch this to be a macro operator, in DaVinci Resolve, it's just gonna be locked off. I can't get into it unless I were to go into code and then switch this from macro to group. And then once you're done with that individual preset, you can just come down to the download.setting file, and then you can throw that into your effects folder. But if you wanna make this easy to share with other people and just easy to install in your own project, you can use a .drfx file. The first thing we need to do is give this a name. So we're going to do MacroLab templates. Once I give this a name, we could also give it a provider, which might be like WippTemplates, as well as a category. We're going to call this one MacroLab. Once I have that set up, I'm just going to do add current macro, and it's going to add that right down here. We can choose which category we want it in, which in this case is going to be titles, and then we can choose between a group or macro operator. You also have an option to import an image. So what I'd recommend there is right-clicking in your Fusion viewer, coming to save image, and then importing that image into the spot so that way we can get a preview of what the tool is going to do. Now before we download this or add more tools to it, right up at the top it's saying one missing asset, and that's because I used a loader node to pull in that image. So if I were to send this to someone else, they wouldn't have that image and it would all break. So what MacroLab can do is embed that image inside of the .drfx file, so that way if you give this to someone else, it's automatically going to work and they don't have to relink that image. If I click on this button, it'll tell me which one's missing and I can browse to pick that file. Once that's done, you can just press the download button and import this right into DaVinci Resolve, but you don't have to stop there. You can actually add more templates into the same .drfx file by pasting something in, controlling all the settings, and then pressing this add current macro to queue. If I were to refresh the page so that way I'm just starting new, I can drag that same .drfx file that we just made right into here, and it's going to open that up and bring us to the same spot that we're at, where we can see that this is inside of the .drfx file, and we can edit this without having to unzip it and do all of that crazy stuff. Well, as you can see, MacroLab is a very powerful and versatile tool. It's a great thing to have in your workflow to turn some of your most used effects into reusable templates that you can access right from the edit page. And just so you know, it still isn't the best at handling really advanced macros like my WippTemplates tools, but it's not designed for those. It's designed to allow you to turn your effects into templates that you can access right from the edit page, not making super advanced templates that work for everyone's workflow. That said, if you do want some awesome pre-built templates that still allow for a ton of customization, check out Editor Collection and Editor Titles down below. Like mentioned, I use these to edit all of my videos, and together they save me hours on each project. In addition to that, if you buy them through the link on MacroLab, Matt will get a commission which will help support him as he develops and provides MacroLab for free. For more training and the latest updates regarding MacroLab, make sure to subscribe to Matt's channel. Also leave a comment down below with what you think about MacroLab, and make sure to say thank you to Matt McCool. I'll see you guys in the next one.